We're going to start on Daf Yud Aleph on the third line down from the top. Omer of Yehuda Omer Rav, Kol Amariv es Atzmo, B'shnei Ra'avon. Until now, we've been speaking about people going out on a journey and they should limit the amount of food that they eat so they'll have enough supplies, or it shouldn't mess up their digestive system. But now we're talking about a person who's not on the road, he's not on a journey, but it's during Shnei Ra'avon, and Klal Yisrael are in a state of famine. And if he identifies, commensurates with the people, then Nitzal Mimisa Mishuna, he'll be protected from some sort of violent death, like through the sword or through famine. Shenemar, because the pasuk says in Eov, Bira'ov Padcha Mimoves. And the Gemara is asking, by implication, the question of why the pasuk emphasizes the word Ra'av. If the pasuk wants to teach us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will redeem a person from death of famine, then it shouldn't have said Bira'av Padcha Mimoves. It should have said Me'ra'av. It should have said Bira'av Padcha Me'ra'av. That's what it should have been written. Ella, why does the pasuk in Eov use the word Mimoves? And we should darshan hachikama. B'schar as a reward, shemarav es atzmo b'shnei ra'av, since he denies himself plentiful food, he diminishes his food during the years of famine, of drought, in order to identify with the Tsar of Klal Yisrael. Then Padcha Mimoves, not only from death from famine, which would have been Mida Keneged Mida, but even Nitzal Mimisa Meshuna, from any kind of violent death. Omrei Shlokish, also the other L'shamish Mitasa B'shnei Ra'avon. We're going to derive from Yotzei the halachic conclusion, which by the way is brought down in Hilchos Tainios and Shulchan Aruch, that a person should refrain from intimate relations during the years of famine. Because once again, a person should be noeg, he should behave in a way that's a manifestation of tsa'ar. Shenemar, Uli Yosef, Yulad Shnei Vanim, B'terem Tavo Shnas Hara'av. Yosef fathered two sons before the years of famine. And why did the Torah have to emphasize, who cares that these boys were born before the years of famine? It must be coming to teach us that Yosef abstained from intimate relations during the years of famine. And from that we derive the conclusion also, L'shamish Mitasa B'shnos Ra'av. However, Tana, the Brisa tells us there's an exception to this rule, in which case you're allowed to be Mishamish Mitaso during the years of Ra'av. And that's called Chasuche Banin, those who are childless, which means, and the Mefarshim explain, it doesn't mean childless, it means they have not yet fulfilled the mitzvah of Pirya Verivya, which we paskin like Beis Hillel means one boy and one girl. So until they get to the point of having fathered both a boy and a girl and fulfilled the mitzvah period, they're called Chasuche Banim. And the law is that we are lenient with regard to such a person, and we allow him to engage in intimate relations for the sake of period river, even during Shnos Hara'av. And here we have a question which is raised by Tosfos about Yocheved Bas Levi. The Gemara says about Bas that she was born in Mitzrayim during those difficult years. And if she was born in Mitzrayim, then by definition it means that Levi was Meshamish Mitaso during these years of Ra'av. And Yeridas Mitzrayim was during years of Ra'av. So there are a number of answers to this question. One answer, which is very important, is that according to the strict letter of the law, both in the case of Yosef and in the case of Levi, they would be permitted to be Mishamish Mitasav during Rav because they were in the category of Chasutei Bonin. And that's because Yosef did not have a bas. However, Yosef took it upon himself as a midas chasidus lahachmir, but Mikra did it was mutter. Levi didn't take upon himself that umrah, and since he had not fulfilled the mitzvah period of Rivya, therefore he engaged in marital relations, and from that Yocheved was born. However, the Ritva offers a different answer, that when Yisrael are Shruyim b'tzar, then there's a prohibition against Tashmish Mita. However, the Tsar of Mitzrayim is not enough to generate this Isur of Tashmish Mita. Yosef was not Mishamish Bitaso for a different reason. He thought that his father and his brothers were Shruyim B'ra'av, because they didn't come down to Mitzrayim at that point, and they didn't have the supply. And therefore, Yosef was not Mishamish Bitaso because Yisrael Shruyim B'tzar, but that doesn't apply to Mitzrayim. And Tsar Mitzrayim is not called Shruyim B'tzar. Levi, on the other hand, and all the Yardei Mitzrayim, they knew that their situation was not as severe. They were sveim, they still had food to eat, and therefore at that point there was no Isur, and that's why Levi could father Yocheved. We learned in the Brisa, when the Jewish people are in a situation of tsar uperesh echad mehem, and somebody decides he's porish minat tzibur. Like, for example, there's Ra'av in the city, and he goes to some other place, or he eats, even though they're in a fasting, in a Taanit situation, is then the punishment is boim shnei malachi ashorish malavin lo li adam. As a general rule, two malachim accompany a person and protect him. We derive from apostle, but in this case, the two malachim who are there to accompany him for the purpose of protection now achieve the opposite goal. They put their two hands on his head. And here there's a discussion about malachim, if they have yadayim, they don't have yadayim. In Yechezkel it says, V'yadei adam mitachas l'knafeim. Underneath their wings, they had sort of the image of hands. And these hands they put on top of the head of this person who's poresh b'nat tzibur. B'omrim, and they declare, Ploni zeh sheperesh b'nat tzibur, al yira b'nechamas at tzibur. If he doesn't commensurate with the tsar of the people, then he won't be part of the celebration when there is consolation. Here, we have a question of the Tosas Yontif. A person could say, look, I don't want to be part of the Tsar of the Tzibur, and I don't want, therefore, to be part of the Nechama of the Tzibur. It doesn't bother him. Why is this a serious threat that he won't be part of the Nechama when he'll say to you, who cares? I don't have to be part of the Nechama. And the Tosas Yontif answers that certainly the Nechama of the Tzibur is even greater than the Tsar of the Tzibur. And that's based on a Gemara that formulates in Yuma Daf Ayin Vav the principle that Mida Tova Maruba, that when God does Tova, it's even greater, and he's not going to be part of that. He will be mafsid that. Tanya, either we have another brayso of Bisman Shat Tzibur Shari Mitzah. When the Tzibur is in a situation of Tsar, Al Yomar Adam, a person should not declare, Elech lebeisi, I'll go home. I have plenty of food in my cupboards, ochel veshte, v'shalom alecha nafshi, and I have peace, and nothing terrible happened to me, and therefore I don't have to be part of the tsar of the tzibur. In Osekain, the Brisa says, if he lives his life and behaves in that way, all of Hakosim Doma, the Pasuk says in Yeshaya, v'hinei sason v'simcha, harog bakar v'shachot tzon, achol basar ushtos yayin, achol v'shaso ki machar nomus. He fits into the category of the Rishonim that are described by Yeshaya that don't pay attention to listen to the voice of God, they say, you know what, we're going to die at the end of our days. Right now, let's experience sason and simcha before we die. And they basically laugh about the Dvar Hashem. They're not interested in God telling them that, the people are bitzar. And Mike Siv Basrei, in the very next pasuk, Yeshayahu Hanavi says, "V'nigla ba'aznei Hashem tzvakos im yichupar ha'avon hazel lachem ha'tebusim." The Navi says that I heard in my ears from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that your sin will not be atoned for until you die. So the Gemara says that, wait a second, what level of Rishonim are we really dealing with? Because even these Rishonim are admitting ki machar namus, that we will die tomorrow. In other words, they do have the fear of death. So therefore the Brisa says, Ad kan midas beinanim. Now when it says midas beinanim, it doesn't mean a beinani, that's half and half. He's hopefully on his way to do good. We're not describing here beinanim who are eating and drinking because tomorrow we'll die, but rather it's beinanim relative to the next level, which is really the bottom barrel. Those are the Rishonim that we'll soon see don't even believe the Navi that there's going to be death, that we have to fear death. At least these beinanim are afraid of death, but as a result, they decide to be parish min hatzibur, forget about the tzara of the tzibur, and eat and drink. However, now we get to the lowest level, the bottom barrel. Avol midas harishoyim aksipe. What does it say with regard to Rishonim? And in that same series of psukim there in Yeshayahu Hanavi, it says, Asayu, they brought me, Ekha Yayin, wine which I will receive and drink, Vinisba'a, and I'm going to get drunk, Shechar, old wine, Vahaya Kazeh Yom Machar, and I don't care what tomorrow brings. Right now, I'm going to just get intoxicated. And the end of the pasuk says, Gadol Yeser Ma'od. That even tomorrow, we're going to make parties and we're going to even add Gadol Yeser Ma'od, even a more beautiful party than today. We're going to enhance that party. We're going to celebrate that banquet will be enhanced. They don't worry about mis at all. They're not even willing to recognize death. And these are the bottom barrel Rishonim Aksiv Basrei. What does it say in the very next pasuk? Hatzadik avad v'ein ish sam alev ki mipnei hara'a ne'esaf hatzadik. As a result of these Rishonim, who are the most extreme Rishonim, the tzaddik will die. Ne'esaf hatzadik. Kishat tzaddik niftar ein anoshim samim el liba lahavim mipnei mahu niftar. The pasuk declares that people will not realize and recognize why the tzaddik died. But in truth, because of ra'ah that came about through these Rishonim, this evil, therefore the truth is that God will take the tzaddik. And here Rashi offers two interpretations. What is the reason that God takes the life of the tzaddik? Because of the ra'ah, the evil of this bottom level of evildoers. In one shot, Rashi interprets it that God wants to spare the tzaddikim of seeing how God is going to punish that generation, and there'll be so much destruction and death. Rashi offers another pshat, and that is that God will take the life of the tzaddikim so that they shouldn't pray on behalf of the Rishonim v'mavakesh rachamim. This is the way that God signs and seals, closes the possibility of having any compassion on these lowest level Rishonim. The Nemuki Yosef adds another element of the equation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes the lives of the tzaddikim so that they shouldn't pray and protect that generation and bring them and inspire them to do tshuva. It's a little bit reminiscent of what it says about Paro, that Hichbid es libo, and God made it impossible for him to do tshuva because he had passed all the red lines. Now the Brisa now continues and explains that a person has to be mitzar himself when the tzibur is in a state of tsar. And there are three dimensions to this principle that a person should be mitzar when the tzibur is mitzar. Number one, he's got to show his tsar on the outside, that he's together with the tzibur. Number two, even when he's on the inside, he's in a private place, he should still be mitzar. And number three, even in his heart, in his nefesh, he should be totally identified with the tsar of the tzibur. Eli yitzar adam imat tzibur. Number one, he should outwardly behave bitzar to identify with the tzibur. Shekei matzina b'Moshe Rabbeinu shetziras atzmo matzibur. Where do we find that Moshe Rabbeinu on the outside was mitzar himself because of the tsar of the tzibur? Here at the end of Parshas B'Shalach, in the episode of the Milchama against Amalek, and Nemar, the pasuk says, "V'yidei mochek veidim, vayikchu even, vayasimu tachtav vayeshiv oleh." Now we understand that Aaron and Hur had to be tomech b'yadav, but why was Moshe Rabbeinu sitting on Evan? V'chi lo hoya leMoshe kar achas o keses achas leishev oleh. Couldn't they have a pillow, that's made of feathers? It would be a lot more comfortable for Moshe to sit on a pillow than sitting on a stone. So they had that option, and yet deliberately Moshe Rabbeinu chose to sit on a stone. Elakach Amar Moshe, Hol v'Yisrael shruim b'tzar, afani eya imoem b'tzar. I also want to identify with the tsar of Klal Yisrael. Therefore, I want to sit in a painful place on a stone. I'm not going to sit luxuriously on a car or a keses. Keses is a larger kind of pillow, but rather on a stone, l'shtate b'tzar. Now here we have a major kash, because in Milchemes Amalek, the danger was for everyone, including Moshe Rabbeinu. So what does this mean that Moshe Rabbeinu was mitzar himself for the tzibur? He himself should have been mitzar. The godless, the greatness of being mitzar and tzibur mean if you're outside the tsar, you're not suffering, then yet empathetically you identify with the tsar of the tzibur. But Moshe was in the tsar. Masha Lomdu, be Moshe Rabbeinu, af shehu kein hoya ba'osa tzar shel Milchemes Amalek, bishum shevada yoda Moshe v'koch nevuaso, shal yidei aromas yodo yinatzchu Yisrael. He wasn't psychologically in a state of terror or fear because he knew, he had total, absolute confidence in the fact that they would win the battle because of the aromas yoda. But yet Klal Yisrael was not in that state. They were in tsar, going out, being victims of the attack of Amalek. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu, even though he himself knew that there was no problem here, that God would save him, he put himself out and he sat on his stomach. He will live to see the consolation of the tzibur. This Gemara is very reminiscent of a Gemara at the end of Masechet Taanit with regard to Avelis al Churban Abayis. The Gemara says, "Kolamas Abel al Churban Sofo v'yira b'nechamos." Now the Gemara quotes the last piece of this brisa. Why is it so important that a person on the outward, even outwardly, be mitzayir himself with the tzibur? And the answer is because of Maras Ayin. V'shema yomar odom mi meid bi. A person will say, and this is a toast, a mistake, but he's going to say that there shouldn't be any prohibition about me eating or drinking when I'm alone. Again, if it's in the presence of the tzibur, that I could understand. And that's an issue of Maras Ayin if I eat and drink publicly, but there's no Maras Ayin if I eat and drink in the privacy of my house. And the Brisa says, no, this is not so. There will be testimony and public knowledge of the fact that you're eating and drinking when the tzibur is mitzar. How so? Avnei Beiso Shel Adam, V'koros Beiso Shel Adam Me'idin Bo. Even that which you do in private will ultimately become public knowledge. And your neighbors will know because the stones and the beams of your house testify how you behave inside the privacy of your house. Shenemar Pasuk in Chabakuk, Ki even mikir titzak, the kafis is a kind of a brick, me'etz ya'anena. And there the Pasuk is talking about someone who stole the possessions of someone else. Everybody knew about the theft. And how so? Because it's like the stones of his house are yelling from those walls, Gzulani, meaning that the walls of the house yell that he stole perhaps the house or the stones. And the beams that are structured between the wood and the beams of the ceiling, they're going to say, I was also stolen. And from the fact that the beams and the walls and the stones will publicize his selah, we're going to apply that by analogy to the case of a person who's eating and drinking comfortably and luxuriously in the privacy of his home, but through the Avnei Beis of the Koretz Beitzo, Yispars Masa, people will know about it, and it becomes public knowledge that he is not identifying and commensurating empathetically with the tzibur. Now the Gemara quotes another opinion as to how the sins of a person will become public, even if he commits them privately. We spoke earlier about the fact that a person is always accompanied by two malachim that protect him. But hey me'idino, they will testify against the person the very fact that they will abandon him and expose him to be vulnerable to all sorts of damages when they were meant to protect him. That's how it will become public knowledge that he is a sinner. Shenemar, as it says in Tehillim, we quoted the pasuk earlier, that normally if things are going well and a person is observing the will of God, then he will be protected by two malachim. Rabbi Chidka Omer, Nishmaso shel Adam hisha me'ida olav. Now, in order to understand Rabbi Chidka, like this is the same Rabbi Chidka that the Gemara says in Shabbos would add to Sudas Shabbos. He ate not only 3 Sudas, he ate 4 Sudas. Anyway, the neshama of a person is one element in the essence of a person. The person, an Adam, Ben Adam, is made up of nefesh, ruach, uneshama, for our purposes. Now, the source of sin is the nefesh, and that's a pasuk in Yechezkel, nefesh hachotas. Certainly, the nefesh cannot testify on her own sins. Now, ruach of a person, which is more spiritual than nefesh, but nevertheless, sometimes even a chacham will sin, and that sin emanates from his nefesh. From his ruach. So we've got nefesh and ruach that are excluded. Neither of those could testify because they themselves might be the source of the sin, but the neshama never enters into the gufa adam. It always remains outside of man like a shadow. And she, the neshama, could testify in the Masechet ha'adam. So these malachim that we discussed before that normally would protect a person, in a case where he is guilty of sin, they transform their shmira into what we call bedikas maisav or digduk maisav, and they'll testify in the future against him. And according to Rabbi Chidka, it's the neshama that testifies against him, because the neshama is not the source of his sin, the neshama is on the outside. And Rabbi Chidka proves this from a pasuk in Micha, Shenemar. I'll read the entire pasuk. It says, Al taminu berea, mishocheves cheikecha. She lies in your bosom. Shmar Pische picha. Be careful about what comes out of your mouth. And what this means is that we should not believe even a friend that is a close friend. And we should be very careful when we speak about other people, especially our friends, even in the presence of our wife. The wife is called shocheves cheikecha. And when you're in the presence of your wife, you have to be very careful not to speak about your friend. Why? Because it could be that your wife will reveal this to others. And this is going to be a mashal for the neshama, which is a shocheves becheko. The neshama, in its relation to the guf, is called shocheves becheko. And a person should be careful not to sin, even though, let's say, in this world, he's not punished for it, and he doesn't get damaged for it. But nevertheless, his neshama is watching him, and he will be punished in the olam haneshamas, and the neshama will testify against him. That even the very limbs of a person will testify against him. It says in Yeshayahu Anomi, "V'atem eidai ne'um Hashem." And we're going to darshan that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is addressing Am Yisrael, and he's telling that they themselves, meaning their gufos, their evarim, will be the witnesses to testify on their actions. And now the Gemara quotes a brisa that addresses schar v'onesh, reward and punishment in this world and in the next world, based on a pasuk in Devarim, Perek Lamed Beis, Parshas, I believe there's also a brach. It says, Hatzur tamim palo, ki chal drachav mishpat. This is Parshas Hazinu, I think. All right, I don't have time now to look it up. But in any event, Dvarim Lamed Beis, El emunah ve'en aval tzadik v'yashar hu. So Bryce explains this pasuk. El emunah, this teaches us kshev jenifrad min harishayim li'olam haba. Just like the Rishayim will be punished in the next world. In this world, we'll see that they get away easy. Is afil al avera kalash osin. And even on a relatively light violation, criminal act, they will be punished in olam haba. Ach nifroim. Now, in the opposite of the mirror image, with regard to the tzaddikim, they will be punished by olam hazeh, even for an avera kala. And here I have a very important comment in the name of the Ben Ish Chai, and that is the following: that even if, as a result of relatively light sins, the tzaddikim would be doomed to spend some time at least in Gehenna because of their sins, then the roim, the spectators, will think that they belong together with the Rishayim. That's why they're in Gehenna. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that I want to fulfill my havtacha to give the tzaddikim a nachla in Gan Eden. Therefore, I'm going to punish them in this world for their averos, those light averos, so that they won't go into Gehenna at all. They'll go directly into Gan Eden, skipping Gehenna. And then everyone will declare and everyone will recognize and acknowledge that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the El Emunah. He is reliable to fulfill his promises. V'ein Ovel. What do we learn from V'ein Ovel? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu will never deny schar mitzvah, the reward for a mitzvah, even a mitzvah kala of a rasha. He'll be rewarded in this world. And again, we have a mirror image in which we flip it upside down from the tzaddik to the rasha. The tzaddik will receive all his reward in the next world, even for a mitzvah kala. Kach, in the opposite way, the Rishayim, even if they do a mitzvah kala, will be rewarded in this world, so that they won't have any reward in the world to come. And finally, the pasuk says, "Tzaddik v'yashar hu." HaKadosh Baruch Hu is matzdik dino shel tzaddikim. so that they should be punished in this world, even for light averos. And Yashar means he's doing Yashrus with Rishoyim by paying them up in paying their rewards in this world, so that they'll be Torud B'Olam Haba, that will have no benefit from Olam Haba. Amru, the Chachamim said, B'Shas Pitiraso Shal Adam L'Beis Olam, the moment that a person dies and he's taken to his eternal repose, is called Maisav Nifratim Lefanav. There's going to be a list of all of his actions, all of his iniquities. That's going to be shown to him. They're going to say to him, look at this document. This is a testimony against you. But who Omer Hain? He cannot deny it. If he denies it, he'll be laughed out of the courts. He's going to have to admit that this is what he did in that place on that day. And all these Averas are recorded by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is based on a Mishnah in the second parak of Avos at the beginning. It says, Kol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtavim, that all of man's deeds and misdeeds are recorded. Again, there were Ma'asim Tovim also recorded in that same sefer, but Midah Tovim Meruba. But we're focusing now on his failures. And Omrim Lo, the Malachim say to this man, or any man, Chasom, since you don't deny that this was indeed your actions, you behaved on such a day, sign the document. V'chose. He cannot deny the truth, and therefore he attaches his signature to the document. Shenemar, as we see in Eov, biyad kol adam yachtam. And this is a person's own signature, which is called in Choshev Mishpah, it is called Ksav Yodo. We call it today an IOU. And in the prayer in the Taanit Tokef, when we talk about the Kedusha Sayom of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur Yimei Adin, it says, V'chosem yad kol adam bo. I didn't know it was a pasuk in Eov. And furthermore, El Shematzdik Olav Adin, he accepts the judgment as fair. V'omer lahem yafet intuni. This was a din emes v'tzedek. L'kay ma shenemar, pasuk in Tehillim, leman titzdak bidvarech. The Gemara now goes back to the laws of tinios. Omar Shmuel kol yoshev b'tainis nikra chote. If a person on a regular basis takes upon himself to fast, he's a chote. And we're going to derive this from Naz. Savar ki aitana, like we saw in a Bryce of the Sanya, Rabbi Eliezer Akapar, Rabbi, the son of Rabbi, who was the greatest in his generation. Omer, he says, Ma tamalon, what does it say? V'chiper olam me'asher chot al nefesh, that the Nazir, after he completes his Nazirus, he has to bring a carbon, and it's a carbon of all carbonates. He brings a chatas, and he's a chote al nefesh. In truth, this pasuk is in the context of a Nazir who contracted tumas mes. During the course of his Nazirus, he came in contact with a dead body, and after 7 days, he was tar, and on the 8th day, he brings his karbonos, and he's mechaper on a nefesh. So the Bryce in the name of Rabbi Eliezer asks the following question: well, who did he sin against? When it says chot al nefesh, did he do anything to another nefesh? Elo shetzir atzmo bin hayayin. He was chote for his own nefesh by denying himself yayin. And again, we're going to see another opinion shortly, and the opposite opinion will say that this is only because he was metami himself. Then it's considered that he's a sinner and he has to bring a karma chatas to be mechaper on his nefesh. But Rabbi Eliezer is not learning it in that limited context. He thinks it applies in general to every single nazir, even if he wasn't mekabel tumah. Now we can derive conclusions and prove Shmuel's halach of Yosef b'tainis nikvachotim. Why? Hello, dvarim kavachomer man nazir zeh shalot ziras atzmo el min hayayin. All he did was deny himself yayin, everything else he could eat. Nikrachoti, nevertheless, he's considered choti al nafsho is a mitzayos asman kol dover. He denies all food and all drink because he's in a state of tainus. Is alachas kam v'kam. Certainly, is a chote. So all this is based on Rabbi Lazar HaKapar. And now we have another shita that argues against this, but this is going to be an Amora by the name of Rabbi Lazar, not the Tana that we quoted, Rabbi Lazar HaKapar. And he speaks about Yosef B'Tainis Nikra Kadosh, just the opposite, which you give him accolades. He's a holy individual. Sheneman, I'm going to prove it from the very same parsha of Nazir. The Torah describes in Parshas Nazir the Nazir as Kadosh Yeh Gadel Pera Sa'ar Rosh. We see that a Nazir is called Kadosh. And now we have a Kal V'chomer from Nazir. He only denied himself. Yain less Nikra Kadosh. He reached the level of sanctity. That's when we call Davar. How much more so someone who sits as in a tainus, alachas kam v'kam, he's a kadosh, and as a result of his sanctity, that's going to clean him and cleanse him of all his averos. Shmuel who says that a nazir is a chote ha'ikri kadosh. What is he going to do with this pasuk that calls him a kadosh? And the answer is Hahu Agidul Parakoi. The pasuk says Kadosh Yeh Gadel Perasiar Roshel. The seah of a nazir is kadosh. The word kadosh here is not describing the gavra, the bench. He's not a kadosh, he's a chote, but rather it's describing the seah, which has the status of a hegdesh. It's also about nuts, tongue straight. But the nazir himself is not called kadosh. Ul Rabbi Eliezer, who says that a nazir, Rabbi Eliezer says that a nazir is called kadosh, ha nikra chote. What are we going to do with the pasuk? We keep all of Asher Chot al Nefesh, and the Gemara answers, "Hahu tisayv nafshe." He contracted tuma by coming in contact with the corpse, as the pasuk says, "V'chiyomot space all of the feta pison v'timei rosh nizro," and then it says that he is considered a chote, and therefore he has to bring the korban. But in general, Rabbi Elazar says if he wasn't mitami himself, then he is called a kadosh. Gemara asks the following question: does Rabbi Elazar really hold that a person who fasts is considered a kadosh? Don't we have a contradiction from another statement of Rabbi Elazar?